Hi guys, and welcome to this second tutorial, which is following on from the previous one where I planned and talked through my ideas for a question on the Macbeth marriage. How is Shakespeare presenting this? So in the previous tutorial, kind of went through the extract, what we would talk about. How to approach this, what we would mention from other parts of the play. But as that video was looking like a solid 17-18 minutes, I thought I'd split this up, chunk it up into a second video. In this, I'm going to now be looking and thinking about how to actually write up my response. And what I'll be doing here is grade 9 quality. So you can sort of work out where you should be pitching yourself in relation to my version. Okay, and once again, apologies if you can hear background noises of dogs, cats and washing machines. I am having to work from home due to the coronavirus situation that we're all facing at the moment, so apologies for noise quality. Okay, so I talked in the last tutorial about this sense of this being an exposition. It's from Act 1, which is the introductory scenes, really, where Shakespeare seeks to introduce and establish particular things. So if you get an extract that's from Act 1, I would always start in this particular way. I'm absolutely fuming with myself for not bringing some lined paper home. I'm going to see if I can Amazon myself something before I do my next tutorial. So apologies if my lines are super wobbly and all over the place. But I would always start with, and you might want to do this with me, sometimes the kind of kinesthetic thing of writing it down helps. So within the exposition, and then going straight into what is it that Shakespeare establishes, because it will be something, or introducing something. Now, if your extract was from Acts 2, 3, 4, you could say within the climax, Shakespeare develops, or within the denouement, Shakespeare concludes. That's kind of pattern of language you could use. So we need to get that focus on the question. So I'm going to say that he establishes the Macbeth marriage to be. So I'm almost starting off with a perspective or viewpoint here at the beginning. So I really like a list of 3 or a tricolon to set up your viewpoint. So I'm going to say manipulative, toxic, and they're not that normal for the time. So I'm going to say unconventional. And then although your question does say starting with this moment in the play, just want to reinforce you don't actually have to start with the extract. This is just like, this is a jumping off point, a starting point for your ideas, but you don't have to start writing about it. Lots of you might prefer to, but I'm actually going to think about some of the stuff we mentioned in Act 1, Scene 5. So I'm going to actually think straight away about the rest of the play, which obviously we need to mention. So within Act 1, Scene 5, remember, always a capital for act, small s for scene. So within Act 1, Scene 5, so I'm going to just contextualise where I'm taking my example from. During Lady Macbeth's startling, because it's quite sort of surprising for audiences, first time we see her, but within her startling and revealing soliloquy, because it really does give us quite a lot of information about her and about their marriage, she conveys her concern about her husband's goodness, okay, which is in itself an odd thing, to worry that someone is too nice. Goodness, through the metaphor, too full of the milk of human kindness. Equally is a nice link when you want to add in another piece, another point, or to develop an idea. Equally, she reveals that she has a clear and manipulative control over his actions. Okay, I'm then going to say that this is best exemplified. I really like this little expression. So exemplify just means like an example of something. So this is best exemplified. The best example I could choose of her manipulative behaviour is through, I think, that high behaviour quote that I mentioned in the planning, through her imperative, hie thee hither, that I may pour my spirits in thine ear. Okay, so I need to do something more with this quote. I need to kind of zoom in on this a bit more and develop my analysis and explanation. So I'm going to talk about what I feel that this quote reflects. So this reflects her her desperation to have Macbeth home and under her control or influence, and under her influence. Because let's zoom in, and I'm sure when you've looked at this before, you've thought about the word spirits and what that connotes. This reflects her desperation to have Macbeth and under her influence, and the use of spirits connotes a supernatural power which then makes audiences sort of, we associate her then with the witches and the supernatural power we've just seen in Act 1, Scene 3, which then makes us almost associate her power with the witches and their, I want to say sort of evil force, but I'm going to use a better word and say their malevolent and their malevolent force. Okay. Okay, so we've kind of I made a point, and this is dangerous. You sort of, you can make this into a Lady Macbeth question. So we need to make sure that we're focusing on the question around their marriage. So I'm going to say it now. Shakespeare, because it's making sure as well that we're constantly thinking about the writer so that these characters don't feel like they're alive. So Shakespeare juxtaposes her slightly, or maybe very, her, it's not really slightly, her toxic behaviour, because ultimately when you're looking at someone wanting to manipulate their partner, you know, there's a modern thing about gaslighting, but what she's doing is manipulating someone for her own ends, so which is toxic. So Shakespeare juxtaposes her toxic behaviour with Macbeth's seemingly is a good adverb to show, like, well, as it sounds, what something seems. Macbeth's seemingly trusting, loving behaviour. In writing to her to reveal the witch's prophecies, and we remember the quote from last time, the partner in greatness, and in calling her his partner in greatness. And I do apologise because I also forgot to bring home with me, as well as lined paper, a copy of the play. So these quotes are the ones I can remember from many years of teaching, but they may be slightly paraphrased, or some of them might not be 100% accurate, but I think it is partner in greatness. So Macbeth seeming interesting in writing to Lady Revealer, which is prophecies, and in calling her his partner in greatness. Shakespeare seeks to establish, so coming back to that word establish, it really helps you think about the writers structuring something and pulling something together, to establish their marriage as both intimate and potentially destructive. So we've got this sense of there's positives here. There's an intimacy, and also she's ambitious for her husband. So there are elements here that are, in some ways, in a warped way, positive, but equally the level of manipulation that she intends to sort of enact over her husband really has that potential for destruction. So I'm going to think about this in terms of the drama and this conflict between intimacy and destruction. So this conflict sets up the potential, if you use that word again, never mind, the potential for their marriage central, I'm just going to put this as a bit of an aside, central to their joint success. So they need each other in order to succeed, and you know, with their regicidal schemes, to dramatically deteriorate. So there's something here evaluative about the potential here for drama, for their marriage to be torn apart. So I've got quite a developed point. I mean, all we've really talked about here is we've got the high, the hither, the partner in greatness, and milk of human kindness. And there are, you know, a couple of quotes from Act 1, Scene 5 that I could remember. Now, what I haven't done here is talk about specifically about historical context. But if you're making points about, you know, the soliloquy on the stage or setting up drama, you're thinking about the performance of this, and that really does address the idea of context with this question anyway. It's not essential for me just to artificially bolt on a context paragraph. I could quite easily here have interwoven some stuff about gender roles, and think about, you know, the original audience being super surprised to see a woman at this time behaving in a dominant way, taking control of the stage and her marriage, and taking a leading role in decision making. I could definitely have mentioned that. So that's one kind of, and I don't really like thinking in terms of paragraphs for this question. I prefer to think about, you know, ideas that students have that they develop and sort of see through to a natural conclusion. Now that's taken me, I don't know how long, about 12-13 minutes to do. So bearing in mind the time you've got in your exam, and you're not an ancient English teacher and all the rest of it, you know, I would think that if you can do something like 3 points like this, you'd be in an amazing sort of position to get high marks. What I'm going to suggest you do now is, you know, skim back and look at that question, or I'll just stick this on. I'll look at that question again. We're looking at the presentation of the marriage. So there's that extract. So you could just perhaps pause there, take a screen grab, not sure. And I'm just going to put, this is the PEEEEL structure, which there is a separate tutorial on. I'm going to suggest that what you do now is use this framework to continue answering this question from the point I finished off. I, as you see, have kind of thought about this about in the extract, so you could now move on to talk about this part from Act 1, Scene 7. If you didn't want to do that, you could just say later in the play or within Act 2, whichever bit you want to now move on to mention. So you can see you're starting off would be an evaluative point. So in the extract, the marriage presents the marriage to be abusive and dysfunctional, for example. Within the dialogue, Macbeth or Lady Macbeth, choose your quote. So it could be, we will proceed no further with this business, and then zoom in on something about this. So in the examples of what we talked about in planning, you could look at the plural pronoun of we, or the ambiguous euphemism of this business, and really zoom in on what that suggests and therefore audience response. Linking that in, another example, possibly, I like the 3Ps, which I harp on about quite a bit, which is the possibly, potentially, and perhaps. It shows you just being tentative, offering possible. We can't know what Shakespeare intended, but we can think about maybe what he was trying to do. And then bringing in some context. If you've seen a performance, even if that's a film version of it, you can think about something you noticed. But it's really that central idea of focusing on the marriage. Okay, I'm just going to leave, if I can, see my kitchen table. Right, so that is the response that I've just done. If you wanted to do a screen grab of that and, I don't know, print it out, put it with your bits and pieces, please do now. And I will just leave that potential framework there for you to use. Thanks so much for watching, guys.